I've always been intrigued by the game Age of Sigmar, but between 40k, all the other skirmish games I played, my crippling Terraria addiction, it's hard to justify another full-scale army wargame. But the models are cool and I want them. Luckily for me, there is the Age of Sigmar game mode, Spearhead, which unlike 40k's Combat Patrol, is actually really fun. And the Spearhead boxes themselves are the perfect little tastings of the Age of Sigmar factions. They let me experience the build, the painting, and then actually get some gaming in. And I can get it done in a reasonable amount of time. My first experience with Spearhead was with the Ratitos in the Skaven Gnaw Feast Claw Pack. These little rats painted up super quick, and after my first few games, I was hooked and I immediately bought some more boxes. Boxes like the Ogre Maw Tribe's Tyrant's Bellow. These guys were so much fun to paint up that not only did I win a Spearhead tournament with these guys, I also won a painting award. After that, I repainted my old Dominion Stormcast to put together Yandrasta's Spearhead. This one doesn't win me a lot of games, but it's always a ton of fun on the table. Then I decided to dip my toes into a death faction with the Ossiarch Bone Reaper's Mortesian Elite. These big ol' models tend to either win me the game or fail all their saves and die horribly. Between these Spearheads, and a couple more I have that are unpainted, I have hundreds of games of Spearheads under my belt, and another Spearhead that I've got my eye on is the new Cities of Sigmar Spearhead, the Fusil Platoon. This one is a shooting focused Spearhead, which is very unusual. I think the models are nice, but they're not what I envision for a group of regular soldier dudes. These guys are perfectly disciplined, immaculately equipped soldiers. What I'm envisioning is just a ragtag group of dudes doing their best. And luckily, the stars have aligned that I don't have to use these models. In this box are the Long Snouts, 32mm orcs from the incredibly talented sculptor Carlos Perez Bujedo. He sculpted our Catacomb Sappers, our take on some Trench Crusaders, and his claim to fame are the Long Snouts. These beautiful orcs are a multi-part design to be customized with a ton of bits, and he has recently created the Long Snouts Volume 2, which is on Kickstarter now, with a bunch of new weapons and options to spread out amongst the crew. These weapons will be perfect for turning these orcs into my Fusil Brigade. To make my Spearhead, I'm using parts from Volume 1 and 2, printed at 80%, so they're the size of puny humans. The Long Snouts come in 5 parts with a ton of legs, arms, and head options, and cut in such a way to make customizing easy. And their long snout faces are incredibly characterful and detailed, ranging from grim and sinister to silly and fun. Some of these new Long Snouts Volume 2 weapons that I'm interested in are the crossbows and longbows. These will be perfect for my more range-focused force. And these big ol' shields will work perfectly on my Fusiliers. This troll is incredibly detailed, and I have big plans for him later. And these long snoots. To build this Spearhead, I need some dogs, and these are gonna work perfectly. To build this Spearhead, one of the units I need to recreate are the Free Guild Fusiliers. 10 big heavy infantry guys hiding behind some big ol' shields and an ammo squire. To make these, I'm going to be using the longbows and shields. I glued together some torsos with these firmly planted legs, and for the weapons, I'm using the bow bits. This guy is pulling an arrow from his back quiver, and each guy will be behind one of these shields, complete with little kickstands. It'll be a squeeze getting these onto some 28.5mm bases, but they just fit. I put together all 10 shields and then got to work building up the rest of my bowmen, or rather, my bow boys. I gave this guy a knife, although they aren't great at punching, they will undoubtedly still end up in close combat every now and again. These orcs are very easy to assemble, with all their parts being ball joints so I can get them posed exactly how I want. In no time, I had the full squad all built, and then for the ammo get, I used this banner bit, fancy heathered head and shield. In-game, he's a token to bump up the power of one squad he's attached to. Now that the squad is built, that's about 1/3 of my team all done. My 10 brick of Free Guild Fusiliers is done, or I guess in my case, they're the orc shootabows. And then, since this is the Age of Sigmar Spearhead, the 10-man squad is cut into 2 5-mans, and they share the banner guy. He talks them into shooting their bows in close combat. I think the big old shields give these guys the look of a heavy shooty infantry squad. Also, they have movement 5, so they're able to lug these gigantic shields around pretty good. If they charge, they even get 2d6 extra movement, so they can really hoof it with these humongous shields. These shields grant them a 4-up save, which is pretty good in Age of Sigmar, and they have the reinforcement keyword, so after they've inevitably died, they get to come back. But also, there's an ability with this team that the Fusiliers, if both of them are dead, they can come back as a full 10-man block, which is kinda interesting. 10 guys with a 4-up save late game? There's something to it. Now that the bowmen are done, it is time to put together the Wilder Corpse Hunters, which are the doggo handlers. I set aside my finished models and went back to my pile of bits. The next set of models I need to build are the Wilder Corp Hunters, some sneaky infiltrator style guys with crossbows and dogs, kind of an in-between ranged and melee unit. To build these guys, I'm using the feather torsos, running legs, crossbows, and the new heads in executioner hoods. These will give them that ranger look. And of course, the dogs. 5 snoots, 4 of them on separate models, and 1 goes on the sergeant's base. I glued the crossbows to the bodies first so that I could get the legs posed just right and have them running and shooting. And for some of the one-handed crossbows, I dipped into the Volume 1 swords and shields to fill them out. Although they are just regular guys, they do get 2 punches each. For the sergeant, I used this vulture head. It's a fun little detail to make him stand out, and there's another model that'll go nicely with this guy later. I glued some shields onto their backs to help sell them as scrappy warriors, and to get them to fit just right, I put a little ball of green stuff on the shields for the feathery torsos. On one of the hunters, I gave him a bow to represent the double crossbow guy on the squad. He doesn't do anything special in the game Spearhead, but if I ever want to play this as the crew from Warcry, he'll be perfect. These 11 guys are all done, and they will be led by the Wild Shaman, who, just like the sergeant, has some vulture-inspired decorations. The dog squad is done. They get to shoot a little bit better than the Fusiliers because there's 7 crossbows instead of just the 5 bows. They can punch a little better than the Fusiliers, especially with the help of the doggos. And they also have the reinforce keyword, which is nice, but I think it means for them, the move is you play them super aggressive. You rush them out early, right into the opponent's face, hopefully do a little damage, die, and then come back and do it all over again. If you got the reinforcement keyword, it's good to take advantage of the reinforcement keyword. I've got 1 more model to build, the Fusil Major on Ogre Warhulk, bit of a mouthful. And to make this, I'm gonna have to get a little inventive. My box of finished models is growing as I made myself some more space. The next unit is a big one. The Fusil Major on Ogre Warhulk is a big ogre with a guy on his back. He's got some powerful combat weapons, and the guy on top needs a ranged weapon to shoot with. Carlos's troll will be a great base to work off of, and I love the statue he's carrying. This is a reference to the Lewis Chessman, a mysterious 12th century chess set that was found on the Isle of Lewis. The troll is perfect, but I need to come up with a platform for the other guy to stand on, so I dipped into my wooden scrap bin. To attach these to the model, I want to use some green stuff as a transition. I rolled some green stuff out flat and then cut out some rectangles, and I stuck these down to the troll's shoulders, and the shoulders of the statue. I used a ball sculpting tool to press these down on the model and sculpt in some detail. Then I pressed my green stuff even flatter and cut off some tiny squares to be rivets. The foundation of this tower has been hammered into the poor troll. Hopefully the nails only go skin deep. Now for the legs of the tower. These long matches are great, but a little bit too thick. I sanded them down to be smaller. This is really soft wood, so this sandpaper blasts right through it. And I used my Dremel to grind the wood to conform to the shape of his shoulders. I drilled a 1mm hole through my wood so I can pin it down to the model with a piece of 1mm brass rod. This will give me a very stable base for this project. With these 2 pieces securely attached, I just glued the back legs on. They aren't taking any of the weight, so I'm not worried about how strong these are. Now for the crow's nest. I glued up a frame of wood using some super glue and then laid on some coffee stir sticks over top to make the floor. Before I attached the 2 parts together, I decided to add some cross bracing. This is needed for me to actually get this done right now, but also it'll make it look more realistic. To make the bracing more secure, I literally nailed them together, drilling some holes and then inserting some sewing needles as nails. Now that my wood is more secure, I flipped them upside down and then carefully sanded the top of my posts smooth so that all 4 of the posts will make contact with the top platform. Then I loaded them up with thick super glue and squished it down into place. He's standing, and now to decorate it, I'm thinking I'll attach some of the extra long snout shields to the front. He is the leader of the Fusiliers, so having their shields on will help make him look more at home. I superglued these into place using green stuff sandwiched in between to help me squish them securely down into the wood. Using these bits gave me an idea for some more long snout bits I can recycle. I drilled some holes into the wood flooring and then grabbed some spearman arms and clipped these off the hands, sinking them down into the wood. Then to turn these spikes into a handrail, I took a toothpick and wrapped some sewing thread around it in the spear to hold it in position, dripped some thin super glue to lock it in place permanently. Once I had my horizontal railing, I did the operation again to get the rest of the railings into position. This contraption probably swings wildly as the troll walks, so this is a good safety feature. Then for the orc who's gonna be up here, I'm gonna make another bow boy, so I took some quiver bits and glued these to the side of the cage, using more string to add some more structure to this spot. Now that's a war engine. And for the guy on top, I used this fancy back shield bit from the Long Snouts Volume 1 and some bow arms from Volume 2 to make this orc who is having the time of his life firing arrows from the relative safety of the crow's nest. I put away the bits I didn't use for later, and now I have a truly unique spearhead. My take on the Fusil Major on Ogre Warhulk. I've never seen the actual model in person, and I hope I get to play against it so I can compare. I feel like I nailed it. Also, even though this is made out of popsicle sticks and hope, it's really sturdy. Now, this is the last piece of the puzzle. The next step is getting all of these models onto some bases. This is a 24-man spearhead, and it's going to require many different sizes of bases. To make my spearhead perfect, I'm going to use cobalt keep magnet bases so that this team is easy to transport to and from the friendly local game store. The troll stands on a 50mm base, and there are a few 40s, a few 32s, and a ton of 28.5mm bases. Once I had all these prepped, it was time to cork them up. I glued some 1/4 inch cork to the top of all my bases, then I ripped off the excess. And to make the surfaces uneven and natural looking, I used this carbide shaping wheel in my Dremel to really quickly blast through the cork. For the Wilder Corp Hunter's Sergeant, he stands on a 40mm base, and I added a second tier of cork so that his snoot can stand on the lower part, and then he can stand on the high spot. And the bow wielder got a 40mm base too. There was enough room that I could add on some of the arrow bits stabbed into the ground. I put together the rest of the squad all on little 28.5mm bases. For some of these running poses, I put pins in their legs so I can really anchor them into the bases. I'm pretty hard on my minis, so hopefully I won't have any breakage during gaming. For the snoots, these guys cover so much of the base, I decided to add the texture paste first before pinning them on. I coated the surface of the base in some European mud texture paste, then I stuck down my little doggos. I built all the rest of the bases the same way, getting them all corked up, and for the Fusiliers, because they have an orc and a shield on each base, I let the cork hang off the base a little bit more proudly to give myself some more room to work with. But I'm not gluing the shields down yet. I'll paint them up separately and then glue them on at the end. I did glue down my bow boys, setting a shield in place to make sure that I leave room for it. I threw some texture paste down over all the orc bases and decided to build myself a little extra token, using an extra banner bit and some arrows on a 25mm base. This token will be given to whoever gets shot by my fusil major on Ogre Warhulk. The rest of my army gets +1 to their shooting against that target. That is the whole team ready for painting. My fusil platoon is standing, a fusil platoon unlike any that has ever been seen. Usually I don't go for proxies because usually actually seeing the miniatures is what inspires me to get and collect those minis. But in this case, I saw the minis, but they just didn't feel like the rules because the actual miniatures themselves are perfectly trained, drilled, equipped military guys. They feel very elite. But then you look at the rules don't seem very elite. Almost this entire force is hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s. You know, we'll do our best, but don't expect the world. These rules seem much more appropriate for a more ramshackle force, like the Longsnouts. And they're perfectly WYSIWYG. All of these different types of units are perfectly represented in these miniatures. I won't have any trouble telling what's what apart. I don't think my opponents are gonna have any trouble telling what's what. I think my, the Fusil Major on Ogre Warhulk is perfectly represented by whatever this is. The long snouts were a joy to put together, and now that it's time to get some paint on them, I want to come up with a recipe that is nice and quick. Because now that volume 2 of the long snouts is out, there are so many options. There could be more spearheads that I could give the orky treatment to. I started out priming everybody in black, making sure all the bases got a strong coat and the lower halves of my fellas. Then I switched to some white primer and sprayed everyone from above to get a zenithal prime going. I want to lean heavily on speed paint, so I want them as bright as I can get them. I broke out my Silicon Servitor paint palette. Sean got me this as a gag gift, but it's actually kinda handy. For step 1, I'm going with Slaughter Red on some of the clothing. I thinned this with a few drops of thinner, and then I put this over the orcs' cloaks. Each orc got the red somewhere on their clothing. Then I used hardened leather for any fur pelts and their little orc booties. I used some noble skin for the rest of their clothing and chainmail and their little orky helmets. And for the bows and arrows and leather belts, I used dark wood. With all that done, my orcs are looking exciting. It's now time for the orcs themselves. For the skin, I took some Ghillie Dhu speed paint, an extremely vibrant green color, and I slobbered this all over, leaving only their teeth and ears unpainted. I'll switch to a different color for these, but for now, I think I need to do some more steps on these orcs. I've got my Free Guild Fusiliers, or my version of Free Guild Fusiliers, slapped and chopped, and they look good, they've got colors everywhere, but I want them to look better, and I don't want to do any actual brushwork. I don't want to have to paint on all the little volumes in their muscles. And so I think the move is going to be slap chopping them again. The speed paint over the zenithal did a lot of work for me, but now I want to edit it. I love this ink, Raw Sienna. It's a semi-transparent color. I dusted this over the bows and the clothing to highlight and slightly desaturate the red clothing. Then I sprayed this over the tops of their green skin. This softens the contrast and turns the crazy green into a softer, yuckier looking green. Then I took some white ink and I sprayed this onto the black armor, doing one nice spot on each helmet and one puff on the top of each round belly armor to make the metal look shiny. The airbrushing over the slap chopping is doing a good job of blending things together, and I want to push the skin further with some murder scene. This magenta color sprayed from underneath will add some warmth to the skin and make my orcs feel more alive. Now I can put away my airbrush and break out the dry brush. I did a dry brushing of some silver over the metal bits to turn this so far non-metallic metal into true metallic metal. Then I did a dry brushing of some tan over the rest of the orc, over the clothing and the wooden bits. To make my colors more vibrant, I took some Ancient Honey speed paint, thinned this down a lot and then glazed it over the fur pelts and over the skin of my orcs. It doesn't cover the green, just pushes the saturation of the color up a little bit. Then for the mouths and ears, I went back to my murder scene and I dripped this onto their lips. Now my boys are fully painted, it's time to work on their shields. I painted the wooden insides with some dark wood, and I used this on the kickstands too. Then I flipped them over and painted the faces with blood red. I wasn't too careful with this, I'm going to do a lot of weathering later. And speaking of that weathering, I sponged down some light gray over the faces and the shields to make it look like the paint has been beaten off, and then to bring in the metallics, I dry brushed these shields with some silver paint. To make these shields more interesting, I want to do some verdigris. For step 1, I watered down some turquoise siren, and I dripped this into some of the recesses on about a third of each shield. And I dripped this into the metal bits as well. Once that was dry, it was time for some special effects. Dirty Down Verdigris. This is a dark green-blue color that when mixed with 1 part paint to 4 parts water, and then really slobbered onto the model, when it dries it turns into a bright blue in the recesses. This blue underneath worked as a primer and the Dirty Down took it home. One more little thing, for the banner of the Ammo Squire, I painted some crossed arrows. Luckily these orcs aren't great artists, so it makes perfect sense that the arrow freehanding is a little bit rough. That is the whole squad now done, it's time for their hero. I pulled the bowman off of his tower and got to work on my troll, putting some tidal wave over all of his skin. I thinned it down and put it on in layers so I can make some spots darker and leave some areas lighter. Then for his softer skin, I painted some tan over these spots to strengthen the zenithal and clean up some of the blue spillage I did. Then I put goddess glow over the tan flesh to turn it a rosy pink. I used some more tan and white to pick out his tusks and teeth, and I also picked out his toenails. Now my troll is looking pretty, it's time for all the wood. I put some fur brown over all the tower, really thinned down so it tints the zenithal brown, and then when it was dry, I thinned down some dark wood speed paint with a lot of thinner, and I put this all over the wood. After that, I did a quick dry brushing with Baron Dune to bring out the edges and textures in the wood. For the metal bits and the statue on his back, I used some Noble Skin speed paint, and once that was dry, I did a dry brushing of a light gray over these bits, and a second lighter dry brushing of white. Then I hit the shield with some red paint, and this gave me an idea. Pirate pants. His pants have some really nice stripes to them, and I picked out every other one with the same red. Then for the white, I painted these in some pallid bone speed paint to make him look dirty. I painted his earrings with some gold paint, then I switched to some silver paint and I sponged this on the shield. Then I did a dry brushing of all the metal to make them nice and shiny. Once that was done, I put some Dirty Down Verdigris over the shield. I used just a little bit of thinned down turquoise to brighten up some of the darkest spots. I hit his eyes with 2 little red dots and my war machine is done. For the guy on top, I painted him up just like the Fusiliers. The only change I made was to make sure to give him some pirate pants like his buddy. I glued him down into place and that is 1/2 of this spearhead done. My Fusil Major on Ogre Warhulk is done, and now that he's painted up, I feel like the big statue on his back makes a lot of sense. It's the limiter, it makes sure that the troll doesn't move too fast and make this guy fall off. This is the head honcho of the bow long snouts in my collection. He's really important because whatever he shoots at, everybody else hits 1 better. So it goes from 4-4 to 3-4, and that is a big deal. It means that their bows have like a 20% conversion rate as opposed to they're just not gonna hit anything. Now that those guys are done, it is time to turn to the second half of this spearhead. These guys are the sneaky scouty guys, and I want to make sure that they feel different from the bowmen. I put grim black speed paint over their hoods and clothing, then for the feathers and furs, I put white speed paint over these spots. My thinking is that they're wearing vulture costumes to look like their shaman, who is literally wearing a vulture costume. I painted some dark wood over their belts and crossbows, putting some pallid bone over the strings. And for those shields, on these guys, I'm thinking brass instead of steel to make them more unique. I put hardened leather over all the metal bits as a base coat, and then I put some watered down dusk red over the bottom halves of these shields. Once that was dry, I dry brushed the metal with some gold paint, focusing on the top halves, and then I did a final light dry brushing of silver. I put some verdigris onto these brass parts, and once it was dry, the contrast is pretty intense between the warm metal and the cold blue oxide. I hit the skin with the same ghillie doo and an airbrush ink treatment, and now it's time for the decorations. I put murder scene over the heads of the vultures and the little potions on his belt, and I put black over the tips of his vulture beak. Seeing him mostly finished, I don't think there's enough black on him to be a vulture. I put grim black speed paint over his crazy feathers. I highlighted the little vials in his vulture head with some pure red, doing a few layers to make these details really stand out. I dry brushed the wings with some dark gray, and then I did a last sponging of light gray. Just like that, the hunters of my force are done, ready to sneakily infiltrate our website, EonsOfBattle.com. Over there, we have all kinds of hobby goodies, great head studio bits to spice up your Space Marines, army painter paints, brushes, base and cork, and we got glue. Ultra thin and ultra thick super glue. And we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit, good for any one terrain pack we've ever made, or the brand new one. New in March, we have created the Creeping Forest, a collection of mysterious living creatures that can populate a board perfect for any fantastical wargame. Weave your models in between the scuttling crab trees, and you better watch your step or you'll get bit by the timber mimics. As you wander through a forest of monstrous mushrooms dripping with colorful toxins, you might come across the Land Kraken, a master of camouflage and a very dangerous encounter. This wondrous terrain collection was invented by us and is available physically and as STL from EonsOfBattle.com. Now it's time for those dogs. These dogs are cute and plump. I think the best way to paint them is going to be to layer on some regular old acrylics. I glazed some red paint over their bodies, and then I took some moldy wine mixed with black and I glazed this on their undersides and in all the creases in their flesh. Then I took some ice yellow and I sketched on some highlights. These will end up being the brightest spots on my snoots. I glazed thin down red over the ice yellow so that it was still visible underneath, and I did some more glazing of red to make the transition disappear. Once it was happy with my dark purple to red transition, I took some violent vermilion to push the highlights further, painting these on their raised spots like their lips, eye sockets, and ears, and a healthy amount over their long snouts. For the open mouth guy, I put some blue speed paint over his mouth and tongue. Then for the teeth, I mixed some moldy wine with white paint to make a gray, and I did some layering to get the teeth looking nice and pointy. I hit the eye with a coat of black paint with one tiny reflective dot of white right in the center. And just like that, my doggos are done. The boys are back in town. I've got everybody painted, and it's a really nice tasting of an orc army. I got some foot slug and heavy infantry, I got a bunch of scout dudes with dogs, I got the fusil major on ogre warhulk, and I got the commander to lead it all. This is a lot of guys, 24 miniatures, a very big spearhead, and almost all of this gets to come back to life over the course of the game. Can Sean kill 40 orcs over the course of 4 turns? Probably, but I'm still excited to absolutely swamp the board in orcs. The only thing left for this horde of orcs with very long snouts are the bases, and for that I'm thinking classic battlefield with some leaves. I got this leaf punch that I haven't used in a hot minute, and I think it'll be the perfect thing for these orcs. To get the ground dirty, I put some dark brown and earth brown into some cups, put a few drops of flow aid into them, and then some water to make up some wet soupy paints. I quickly coated each base in dark brown, and as a final step, I dripped some of the earth brown onto it to let it seep over the surface. Once I had all the ground covered, I let those alone to dry while I make up some leaves. I'm gonna be using some coffee filters. These are very thin paper with a nice texture. They just need some color. I put some speed paint into a cup and thinned it down. I made just enough to saturate the coffee filter, and I did the same thing with the dirty brown color, and then again with red. I blasted these with my hairdryer to dry them out, and now I've got some lovely leaf pucks. To make these much easier to punch, I held the stack in my hand and cut it in half. Then I lined up my punch along the straight edge and I started punching through all 3 pages. This worked perfectly, and I used a coffee filter to catch the leaves. Once I made it through the whole straight edge, I cut it off and then did it again. I have no idea how many leaves I made, but it is a lot. I pinched and rolled the leaves in my fingers to wrinkle them so that they aren't so perfect. Then to attach them to the base, I lay down a coat of scenic glue. This stuff is very watery and really soaks into the leaves, locking them down for good. I found coating the base in glue, sprinkling on some leaves, and then dripping a little bit more glue over top gave me the best results. With the leaves on there, I glued down the fusilier shields, and the only thing left was to hit all the base rims with a coat of black paint. An entire army done. I have been collecting Spearhead like Pokemon, and I am now the proud owner of the Cities of Sigmar Fusil Brigade, but I do not own a single Cities of Sigmar miniature. Maybe if they made another Spearhead that was focused on a different aspect of the Cities of Sigmar, like maybe the cavalry, I would be a little bit more interested in the GW models, but for a warband of merry men with bows and arrows, these orcs are definitely a better representation of what I was looking for. I really like how this force turned out, and it really tickles me that this is WYSIWYG. This is the Fusil Brigade, just completely different. I got the dogs, I got the sneaky crossbow guys, I got the up-armored infantry, I got the Fusil Major on Ogre Warhulk. It is absolutely perfect. I really hope that I run into another Fusil Platoon player so that we can have the most unique mirror match of all time. These guys are technically the Cities of Sigmar, so they're part of Order, and so I think I own all of the Spearheads based around Order, and 1 Chaos. Is there any Order that I'm missing? I do have the Daughters of Cain, but I don't have them painted. I'm working on getting them built, but I think the next Spearhead that I managed to get done is probably going to be one that's a little bit more chaotic. Thanks for watching.